So, on July 2017, 4 teens went missing in New Hope, PA. I worked the overnight shift at Wawa in that area, and from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., we get all types. The normal obnoxious drunks, cops, and the occasional construction worker or gardener in there for morning coffee, and just everyone. So, when yet another customer came in covered in dirt, I figured he was just a hard-working man in a blue-collar job. He had been in before, so we made small talk and he went on his way. And that was Friday. I didn't see him on Saturday, but then on Sunday he was in again. He got food and a drink, and after the normal "hi, how are you?" he just went on his way again. Monday comes and I'm working like normal when a few cops come in for coffee, and you can tell that something's wrong. "We got a lead on those missing teens," they said solemnly. "But we're searching a farm down the road." And at this point, all of our hearts sank. It had been days since they went missing, so we were slowly losing hope, but this confirmed our worst suspicions. The cops were out there all night, stopping in occasionally to update us. Whether or not they were actually supposed to, I'm not too sure. But they brought in dogs, and eventually they found them, 12 feet down and covered in concrete. And it was bad. At the scene, they could only identify 2 of the teens based on their clothing, but there were enough bones to imply that all 4 were down there, and everyone was just completely devastated. Then the cops asked for our security tapes. And why? We asked, confused. We haven't had any suspicious people around. But it was then that they revealed that the killer, a guy named Cosmo Donato, had in fact been in our store Friday night and again on Sunday. His cousin actually helped him kill, but he wasn't in the store, and the dirt-covered man, he was that guy. I was obviously floored, and when I left work, I looked up a picture of the man that they arrested, and it was him. And apparently, he was covered in dirt because he had just buried the bodies. And I had made small talk and wished him a good day. So last night, my friends, my crush and I, agreed to meet at my favorite bar after work. I was a bit early since I got to leave work 30 minutes early, so I went inside and ordered a beer for myself. Now, there was a huge muscular guy with a long ponytail sitting at the bar, and the seat next to him was empty. He offered me to sit down, so I did. But we made small talk, and he seemed nice enough. Just asked me why I'm all alone, and he kept talking about how I look so uneasy and nervous and that I should relax. It was weird, but he had an almost empty bottle of vodka in front of him, so I really didn't think anything of it. My friends finally arrived just as I finished my first beer, and we went to sit at a table. I had 3 more bottles of beer, and we were having a great time, and whenever I went to the toilet, that guy from the bar was there, asking me if I was okay. Now, that was pretty strange, but at the time I felt just a little bit tipsy and everything was okay. At some point, though, I started to feel sick, so I went outside to have a cigarette and get some cold air, and the guy followed me outside and asked if I was okay. I was starting to get weirded out by that at this point. The bar was super full, but he really seemed to watch me all night. I went back inside, ordered a glass of water, and told my friends that I wasn't feeling well and would be going home. They all offered to bring me home, which I'm so darn grateful for looking back. I took a sip of water, and then it all just hit me. I ran outside and threw up, and I could barely stand up all of a sudden, so I sat down on a staircase and kept throwing up. My friends found me a few minutes later and kept arguing about whether they should take me to a taxi or carry me home. And then the guy from the bar showed up. He kept saying that he lives just down the street and that I could sleep on his couch. My coworker, who is basically like an older brother to me, got really pissed by this and told the guy to F off. They forced me to stand up, which was almost impossible at that point, and somehow dragged me to my friend's place where I went to sleep, hugging a bucket and feeling like I was going to die any second. This morning I wasn't able to stand up for hours, and when I did, it resulted in instant vomiting. It was 1 p.m. when I finally managed to go to the train station, get something to eat and drink, and head home. I'm still shaking and sweating, and everything still looks blurry for me. I've never felt like this, and I went to get a test done because of it all, and it came back positive for ketamine. It was the house I lived in as a kid. We only stayed there for a year because each of us experienced something, so as soon as we could, we moved out. I've honestly been wanting to share my story for a while now, but I've just never had the time. So I'll start by sharing the creepiest ones that I personally experienced. So the first one happened on my 10th birthday party. I had a few of my friends over for a slumber party, and we had our sleeping bags on the floor of the living room. The living room was the front of the house and behind our front porch. When you walked into the house through the porch, you get to the front door, and once in the doorway, there was a staircase to the left, a half bathroom directly in front, and the living room connected to the dining room to the right. The left of the dining room was the kitchen, and it was behind the half bathroom. So, like I said, we were having a slumber party, and we were doing whatever it was that 10-year-old girls do at sleepovers when I just got an uneasy feeling. There were windows behind the couch that were directly looking onto the porch. I remember not wanting to look anywhere near the windows. I was kind of sitting on the floor with my friends when, in the corner of my eye, I saw something bright on the stairs. I didn't want to look, but for whatever reason, I did. I looked, and at the bottom of the staircase was a little boy. He was pale, black hair, and had dark circles around his eyes. He looked calm, and he was just kind of watching. This wasn't the first time that I saw him, though I immediately turned my head and was just frozen. But while I'm sitting there terrified, one of the girls starts yelling that there was someone on the porch. We booked it upstairs and we locked ourselves in my bedroom and just sat in a circle and listened as the girl told us that there was an old woman on the porch. Each of us were rightfully scared half to death at this point, and then the crash happened. In the middle of our talking, we hear what sounded like glass shattering. Again, frozen, some of the braver girls who didn't believe us decided to go and investigate. We followed, and there was nothing. Absolutely nothing was broken. But we all heard it. It sounded like someone smashed the window in with a baseball bat. Well, we ended up sleeping very closely tucked away in my tiny room that night. And looking back on it, I don't know why I never woke up my parents during any of that. So another time, I was babysitting my younger sister. At this time, it was just me and my 3 sisters, ages 13, 15, and 2. I was still 10. My older sister and I were home from school with a stomach bug. My mum had to go and get my 5-year-old sister from school and asked us to watch our younger sister. We were sitting in the living room, and she was eating some snacks and had a sippy cup of water. The top to the cup must have not been screwed on tight enough because when she knocked it over, water spilled just everywhere. My older sister went to the kitchen to get some napkins to clean it up. When she came back, she handed me some of the napkins, and we both started cleaning. We were on our hands and knees wiping up the water when we started to hear banging coming from the second floor. We both paused, looked at each other, and we didn't say anything. But we both had that look of, "You heard that too, right?" We stayed silent and kept cleaning, then again, another bang. At this point, we stand up and are still silent, just staring at the ceiling. And then came the giggling. We heard little kids upstairs laughing. Then the laughing turned to singing, just little children singing and what sounded like a choir or something. My sister scooped up the baby and we ran straight outside. It was a clear day out that day, and I remember once we got outside, it started to rain. We had no choice but to go back inside, but we stayed on the front porch until my mum got home. Now, before we moved to the house, I spent the first 9 years of my life in a house that we were renting. My childhood was pretty much heaven, absolute 1990s kid heaven. I never had any real paranormal experiences in our first home, but I did have some strange premonitions that came true about family tragedies after I started getting severe migraines. Which is actually what I'm feeling a bit now, so I'm kind of nervous bringing this all up again. But anyway, our landlord was planning on selling our home, so we had to act quick and find a new place. I remember looking at a few homes and going to open houses with my family, and I remember the open house for this one. I stayed in the car, I told my parents that it wasn't the right place, and they went in anyway. Later that week, we got the call that we got the house, and my parents were excited to finally be homeowners, but I was still apprehensive, but also still kind of excited to have our own home. After the year that we spent there, they decided to take me to every open house afterwards to make sure the homes were clear. In fact, my dad still asks me to pick lottery numbers for him. Anyway, we finally got ourselves moved in, and it didn't take long to realize that things were just off. The house was 2-story, the first floor was the kitchen, dining room, living room, and half bathroom, like I said. The upstairs was a full bath and 2 bedrooms, and we were a family of 6 at the time. So my 2 younger sisters had the bedroom next to my parents' room, and the basement was converted to a bedroom for my older sister and I. I never slept in there, though. I always shared a bed with my younger sister in her room. The basement just had its own creepy vibe, as most basements do. And that's where we saw the woman in the wedding dress the most. I have to admit that my older sister was really brave to sleep down there by herself. But the basement had this weird stage-type thing in there. It was right by the laundry room with the boiler, and there was heaps of stuff in this area that was just one big step where we kept some storage. To block off the clutter, my sister decorated it with some sort of hippie beads, I think. Now, there was one time my sister was laying in her bed doing some homework, and my mum was in the laundry room doing laundry, when they started to hear the beads clanking into each other. My mum poked her head out to see what the sound was, and when she saw them swaying, she walked out and stood next to my sister just to watch what was happening. They then began to shake even more violently, like they were about to be yanked off the ceiling. They ran upstairs and stayed away from the basement for a while after that, and my mum was always scared to do the laundry after that too. She said that she always felt like someone was watching her down there, so she would sing to herself to stay calm. I can't remember the timelines of all of these events. They're all just kind of scattered in my brain, so I'll start with the events in the basement and the bedroom. So we went away on vacation for a few days, and the house, although it was nice, it started to get a lot of problems. One of them being mice. We never saw one, but would hear scratching, so before we left, my dad put mouse traps around the house. There was a hole in the ceiling in the basement where my dad had placed one, and when we got home, he went around to collect and check the traps. When he reached into the ceiling, he found the trap was gone, but found that something else was in its spot. It was a postcard dated from the 1930s, and it was what you would imagine an old postcard to look like. It was stained and worn, and it was signed and dated with a name that we didn't know, and we read, "Wish you were here." I wish we kept it, and I wish I remembered more about this day, but my dad got rid of it. He didn't show it, but I'm sure he was pretty creeped out as well. And he never did find that mousetrap. Now, this one scares me the most, even though I didn't see it. My sister was in her bedroom when she saw this lace in the corner of her eye. She looked up but didn't see anything, and she kept doing whatever it was that she was doing, and then she saw it again. And again, there was nothing when she looked up. But this went on for a few times when finally she looked up and she saw her, an old woman with frizzy grey hair, looking really disheveled and angry. She had a white veil and a white lace wedding dress, and the way my sister described her was that she was standing with her arms at her sides but kind of stretched out. They were by her sides but not touching her body, and her hands were stretched out. My sister said that she looked frozen and her face looked stuck, and as quick as she was there, she was gone again. My sister didn't spend much time in her room after that one, and she was the only one who fully saw her. The rest of us would just see the lace pass us in our peripheral vision. And so that's what I can remember of the basement at the moment. And now I'm going to talk about the boy. The first time that I saw him was in the upstairs bathroom. I just finished up in the shower and was looking in the mirror and combing out my hair. I know this is going to sound cliche, but the mirrors that we had above the sink were cabinets split into 4, so one was slightly open, which gave me more of a view of the bathroom, and as I was brushing my hair, I looked down for a second and back up, and that's when I saw him for the first time. I looked in the mirror and just saw him standing behind me on my left side. He had the same expression on his face as the first story, calm, but his eyes looked sad, and they were dark. His skin was pale, but for some reason I remember him wearing a type of scally cap, but his hair was black and messy underneath it. I, of course, screamed and ran to my mum's room, and it all lasted about 5 seconds. The second time I saw him, he didn't have the hat. It was the time of the slumber party, and we had this kind of banister type thing at the end of the stairs. He was standing on the last step with his elbow rested on the banister, and again he was just watching, and he scared me, but made me feel sad too. My older sister was the one who saw the nurse. She walked into the living room and just saw a nurse casually sitting on our couch. She was dressed in the traditional old-fashioned nurse dress and hat and everything, and my little sister, who was 5, was sitting in the kitchen with my parents as they cooked dinner. I remember watching TV when I heard screaming coming from the kitchen, and curiously, I walked in and saw my parents trying to calm her down. She said that someone was trying to hold her hand, and she had her hands behind her back playing with the chair, so my dad tried to convince her that it was just her own hand touching the other. But she didn't buy it. She's 24 now and still stands by what she felt, and she said that she felt someone grab her hand. Another time with that same sister, my mum was washing her hair in the kitchen sink. The way my mum would do this is that she would lay a towel on the counter and she would lay on it, and our heads would hang halfway into the sink. So, while she was getting her hair washed, she was looking at a box of strawberries on the counter, and she yelled for my mum to look, and they both watched as the brand new strawberries turned mouldy in a matter of 1 minute. My younger sister, she was 2, almost 3 at the time, she also used to scream and cry about the mean man. My mum would always try to calm her down, but it was never with much luck. She would ask her what man and where is the man, and she would point to the stairs and hide her face away. The way the stairs were designed was that they were mostly just straight down, but towards the end, they turned just a little. She would always point to the corner of the stairs, and it was always the 5th step. And every time that we had company over, someone would fall down those stairs once they reached the 5th step. We never really told anyone that our house was haunted because, honestly, who wants to tell people that? But every person who came over and fell on those stairs said that it felt like someone pulled their legs down. But they all fell the same way too, and it even happened to me and my mum and one of my other sisters, and yeah, it did feel like that. But one time my mum was alone and she was sitting on a bed when, just out of nowhere, a pillow was thrown at her face. My parents saw a teddy bear get picked up off a shelf and carefully placed on the floor one time, like gently just in the air. Same thing with a Cheerio another time. There was also a Furby that we had. Well, what kid in 2000 didn't have one, right? And the whole thing would just go crazy at random times, saying things that Furbies didn't even say. But we took the batteries out and tossed it in the basement, and even then it never stopped, even without batteries. And eventually we just ended up throwing it out. Now, when we were getting close to moving, we had one neighbour tell us that way back in the 1940s or 50s that a nurse lived there with her son. I always wondered if the little boy was there with his mum, the nurse who was on the couch. Another neighbour came by once for a cookout, and he had a bit too much to drink, and went on to tell this crazy story about the whole block was notoriously haunted. We never told anyone about any of our experiences, and he didn't know at the time, so that was strange. At the end of all of this, none of us ever really slept alone. We all slept in sleeping bags in our parents' room with our parents, and it was just an awful place. I still can't drive down that street without getting a sick feeling, and when I do see the house, there's almost always a for sale sign on the lawn. I developed awful OCD while living there too, because I was scared that my loved ones would get hurt. My dad was so normal back then, but after all of that, he changed. I don't know if something happened that he doesn't want to tell us about, but he's finally just now coming back around. Our next house was wonderful, but then a couple of years in, some scary things started happening there too. Some people have mentioned that since my family is sensitive to these things, that we could be like a magnet or something. But that's for a whole nother post. I'm really sorry about the length of this and how messy it is, but like I said, I can't remember everything in order. And if I remember any more, I'll make sure to share it with you. Anyway, thanks for listening, and any feedback or interest is much appreciated. This happened a long time ago when I was 12 and in my grandparents' village. We had a cow and an ox, and usually the son of a bull, usually just one, took all the cattle to graze, and at the night we would just take them back. cows generally know where to go when going home. My grandpa had a male ox, and since my father was an adult and he wasn't there, I usually took the responsibilities. Basically, my job was to go around the village with the ox trailing after me, calling the people to open their doors. Our ox would grunt to call the herd, and all the females would come out. And from then on, I had to take them up to a clearing up on the mountain and then later take them to the river. It was pretty easy, to be honest. The animals already knew where they were going. They were calm, and our bull was honestly a gentle giant, and so all I did was ride him and have a thin rope on his horns. If any of the females wandered off, then all I did was call, or in rare occasions poke her with a dull stick in the right direction. My grandpa said that if I see a wolf, which was very rare, a boar or a fox, that I should stay on the ox. Not many animals dare go near an ox herd. Now, there's a dark part to the forest where it's very quiet and even the bravest hunters won't go in there. Not because of anything sinister, but because it's just very slippery and dangerous. They said that even the deer and the boar dare not go down there. I was forbidden to go there, and honestly, I never wanted to anyway. So, it was an early morning and everything seemed fine. I was on the ox going up the mountain. I was glad that he let me because it was a hard trek up, and I saw that one of the females was wandering off. I followed her and left our ox and the dogs to guide the herd, and she went into the forest. I ran to her and got onto tying the rope on her horns, and I tried steering her away, but she continued. And she went into the dark part and stopped. I didn't want to go off in case she ran back and left me there, and that's when I heard a crunch and turned. And there was a really old man walking towards us. He looked frail with dirty clothes and a long beard, and I was scared, so I laid on the ox clinging to her, not wanting to fall if she ran. Oxen aren't like bulls, and they don't jump and kick when scared. They either attack with their horns and trample, or they just bolt. And so I was ready to hold on no matter what she chose. Our oxen don't take kindly to strangers, and before I took them out, I had to go to every house and have the ox owner introduce me to the animal. But that way they saw that their owner trusts me, and their herd leader or ox trusts me as well. I knew that she was going to either attack or bolt, but it surprised me when she just kind of stood there. The stranger came up to us and petted her on the head, whispering something that I didn't understand. He looked at me, and his eyes were completely white. And then he turned around and left, and he just kind of disappeared in the trees. Suddenly, the female grunted as if she'd just woken up. Our male does that noise every morning, and bolted the way that we came from. We found the herd, and I quickly got on our ox and yelled water, and he knew that command and went down towards the river. There were houses there, and it was closer than home. I barged in one of the houses and tried to explain, and the couple there stayed with me and sent their daughter to call my grandpa. I couldn't sleep for days because I just kept remembering those white eyes, and my grandparents didn't let me out of the house for gardening or anything, and I wasn't allowed near trees for quite some time. Later I learned that apparently they were protecting me from a lesnik, which allegedly is a forest spirit which can take the form of a man, an owl, or a wolf. It hates when people go into its part of the woods, and it can actually kidnap you. I later learned as well that the ox which took me there had fallen ill and apparently died. This lesnik thing apparently sometimes stays in the trees as an owl looking for an offender. And for years, when I went to my grandparents, they wouldn't let me be alone, and not just outside, but inside too. And after that creepy experience, I'm never going into those woods again.